I'm Brigadier General John Love, L-O-V-E, and my title is the Deputy Commanding General of the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force and the Commanding General of the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Brigade.
Tell us a little bit about today, what's going on here and how this helps.
So simply put, what we're doing out here today is we're doing what it takes to ensure that we remain alert and ready to respond to today's crisis with today's force today. Okay, well, this is called Exercise Atlantic Response. It's the second such exercise. We did one like this last year. It is a scenario-driven, simulation-supported command post exercise, and that says a lot. Okay, so let me just break that down into little pieces for you. Okay, so when I say a scenario-driven, there's a fictitious scenario wherein this part of North Carolina is what we call the country of Amber Land, and we're simulating it to represent a fictional country that is has a weak government, has some terrorist activity. You know, it basically replicates the kind of a situation where we might expect Marines to deploy. When I say simulation supported, meaning it is not a live exercise in terms of live maneuver forces. The folks you see out here today are about the only live forces involved in the exercise. There is a large simulation, like a big war game, a big computer-based game, that supports and it simulates the movement of the actual forces. So what we have today out here is we have about 100 personnel from the Marine Expeditionary Brigade headquarters, and then there are about 50 additional people at Camp Lejeune's Simulation Center that are running the simulation. What we're replicating are the command and control functions that you would expect out of a Marine Expeditionary Brigade. And so what we do typically is we run through a series of battle drills and staff exercises that refine our processes for staff functioning. And you can imagine that at this level of a headquarters, a command and control is fairly complicated. So there are a lot of command and control systems, there are a lot of mechanisms. We experienced a fairly high turnover of personnel over the summer. So what we're doing now is kind of back in the saddle training, where we're indoctrinating the new staff members into the team. We're going through our procedures and our standard operating procedures to get us ready, to be ready, should be required. All right, what a Marine Expeditionary Brigade headquarters would normally do would be to exercise command and control over a variety of subordinate forces. And in the real world, those forces could be stationed on ships, they could be stationed ashore, but they would certainly be dispersed across potentially hundreds of miles. What we're simulating today are those forces have just a few representatives. Instead of being a 1,000-man force, they have maybe a 5-man response cell located in the simulation center. We're still communicating with them through our primary command and control networks, and then they put the inputs into this computer-based system so we can see what the result of that would be. We are always refining our processes and looking for ways to become more efficient. Every day, this exercise runs 10 hours a day, and every day when we stop the actual simulation play, we take a little bit of a break, then we huddle and we go through our lessons learned and we figure out where we want to modify our standing operating procedures so that we can improve. Well, we're not trying to replicate any particular country. We're replicating kind of a generic scenario that kind of is a center line of a situation we're likely to face when we employ. So right now we're looking at the littorals of the world, which is where the maritime domain meets the land domain, and we anticipate that crises are likely to occur in the littoral domain. And when we analyze those areas in the world, they are areas where there are failing, maybe not failed states, but weak governments, rising insurgents, humanitarian assistance, sometimes exacerbated by a natural disaster. So we're just putting all those things together in one fictitious country to simulate that possibility. Okay, well, we conduct these exercises like this about once a year, but this exercise in particular is going to prepare this staff for a very large exercise that's going to occur next spring called Bull Alligator 13. You may recall that the Marine Expeditionary Brigade was involved in Bull Alligator 12 last year. Well, we are going to be doing the same type of exercise at the end of April in 2013. So that's the kind of the frequency of exercising. Now, in terms of scale, what you see today is about 1/2 of the normal footprint of a Marine Expeditionary Brigade when it's in its full size. It took the team about a week last week to come out here and set all this equipment up, do all the communications checks, and then it took about a day for the staff this week to come in and sit behind their seats and plug in and become familiar with the equipment. It's a 3-day exercise, and it runs about 10 hours a day during the live simulation play. But of course, the staff was working several hours prior to that for briefings and several hours after that The benefit of coming out here in what we call an off-site location is that we're away from Camp Lejeune, we're isolated, and just as important as it is to develop our standing operating procedures, it's important to start to develop teamwork and camaraderie, to where you start to learn each other personally as well as professionally, so that we can develop this speed of trust, which also translates into our efficiency during crisis operations. Well, what happens a lot of times in crisis situations is the necessity to make decisions very fast. And when you know each other personally and professionally, and you start to what we call to communicate implicitly, which is you understand how each other think, you understand how you feel, the staff get a feel for the information that is necessary for me to make decisions, so they're not cluttering me with excess and trivia stuff. So we refine those processes to where it's that speed of trust we call translates into speed of execution, because the faster we can make a decision, then the more time our subordinates will have to prepare for execution. And we like to then push down to those elements as much time as possible to plan and prepare for execution of the mission. So some of the scenarios that we're running through in the next couple of days are to replicate those types of crises that we may encounter. And we go back and we review the crises that have occurred over the past several years that have involved Marines, and we see that there's kind of a theme. One, it's of course always protecting U.S. national interests, whether it's reinforcing our embassies with security, whether it's conducting non-combatant evacuation operations of American citizens overseas. Then it's also the type of humanitarian assistance, disaster relief. And then you can go from that kind of low-end type of military operation toward kind of the higher end, where it may require more of an amphibious raid or amphibious assault to seize and hold, and maybe be the opening force for a larger force to come in afterwards. But right now in this exercise, we're focusing on the lower end of that spectrum. What I'll expect probably to see today is evacuating a simulated embassy. We've identified perhaps a terrorist training center where we may try to go in and do a raid to snatch a couple of high-value individuals, so we can interview those folks. So it's that type of exercise, and not a full amphibious landing. We're going to do that in Bull Alligator 13, to which you certainly will be invited to come out and observe.